So hello everybody and a very warm welcome to FinTech Talents Building Societies. We're here on the main stage for a really important discussion. First of all, my name is Julia Streets. I'm the host of this session and I'm also the founder and CEO of a business called Streets Consulting. We work with some of the smallest startups to some of the world's largest financial institutions, helping them to grow. And of course, when we talk about the road for digital transformation, we talk about digitalization and innovation and, I could go on, but of course, the really key thing is about culture. Fascinating years to be having this discussion in, and I really can't wait to get started. So allow me, without further ado, to introduce our wonderful panel today. First of all, we're joined by George Winch. George, hi there, give us a wave. Wonderful to see you. Thank you for joining. George is a senior director of partnerships from Zafin, and he's been there for about 8 years in a number of different roles. And they're all about enterprise-wide software that helps financial institutions to overcome their core system limitations. So really think about core functionality and build deeper, more personalized and more valuable client relationships. About product, it's about pricing. So George, it's wonderful to have you on the panel with your thoughts on that. It's great to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Julia.
Joining George is Steve Round. Now, Steve is the chair of the Ecology Building Society. He's an entrepreneur who believes very passionately that we can use financial services to create a fairer society. He's worked with the major financial institutions as well as startups in the UK and around the world. And he launched his first cloud-based banking platform in the UK, giving individuals who are homeless and financially excluded access to a first-class bank account product. So, Steve, wonderful you could join us. Thank you very much.
We're looking forward to it. Thank you.
So joining George and Steve is Kelly Wagner-Grawl. So she is the Director of Innovation and Member Experience at the Credit Union of Colorado. She leads the cultural efforts around innovation and the desire to support new ideas, foster experimentation and drive continuous improvement at the Credit Union of Colorado. She's all about how the organization can continue to deliver true value and also to engage with its members and thinking about how do you harness the potential of employees on that journey. So Kelly, it's great to have you with us from Colorado. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Hello, everybody.
Hi there. So last but no means least, we're also joined by John Hull. Now, he's the head of resourcing delivery at Nationwide Building Society. He's an HR and a talent management leader with more than 20 years of experience, strong international experience, and a track record of managing change and also diverse teams. At Nationwide Building Society, he's part of their efforts to transform the society from a traditional FS retail player into a true multi-channel offering, all about technology and innovation. So, John, great to have you here. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks a lot.
Brilliant. Wonderful. So we're going to be talking about the culture of innovation, the digital culture. And I just want to say to everybody, we do have a chat function on the right-hand side of your screen. So those of you who have tuned in to watch us today, please you can interact with some of the panelists, and you can also interact with each other as we're going through it. So really looking forward to this. So is culture the key to digital success? And I guess the most sensible place to start really is, what are the attributes of a digital culture when we talk about these things? So where do you focus when you're building a digital culture? And also, I'm really keen to explore what's been hard to achieve. So John, I'm coming to you first, the HR man on the panel.
Yeah.
So talk to us about digital culture and also what's been hard.
All things that are difficult come HR way, right? I think there's two things, right, that are hard. I think there is a skills element, especially from our perspective, which is a traditional retail, FS organization where you're used to interacting with customers through a branch or through a telephone, historically. So finding and being attractive to those skills that drive innovation and creativity is number one. So are you a destination, and how do you create that mindset in the market and understanding of what your offer is, but equally, how do you build it yourself as well? Because, we know that across the whole of that innovation landscape, the skills are, there are fewer skills than there are demand for them. So you have to think long term about how do you build your own canvas of skills and creativity. And then alongside that is obviously mindset. So there's leadership and mindset to get you in the place that is accepting of that, because that becomes diverse and different, and by just focusing on the skills. The organ might be rejected if all you're focused on is the skills element only. So shaping the thinking and new ways of working is incredibly important in creating that culture and setting up for success. So as much work needs to go into leadership and management development and understanding as does a skills or training program or a graduate program for IT professionals or digital folk or designers, and then equally you need to reflect the customer, or in our case our member experience. What are they really looking for, and how do you set that mindset in the minds of leaders and operators that actually reflect that. Because it's really easy for us as Nationwide, we're 150 years old, we've got a legacy in customer service, to say, well, we're good at customer service, full stop. That's our heritage and legacy. But very quickly we could be caught out by not offering the right channel or changes to our products that mean that those customers that we take for granted will easily shop around in this age of open banking, right? So I give an example. Our membership and customer base is twofold. We have, pensioners and those with assets and property at one end, who arguably are kind of the heritage and the legacy, who like to visit branches, who like to talk to someone on the telephone, and someone like my daughter who's 21, who probably out of choice would never ever go into a branch if she didn't have to, right? So we need to build a product and a service or products and services that reflect that experience.
And what's been difficult, sort of in the attitude of developing those aptitudes, if you like. Yeah. What's been difficult?
I think there's nothing difficult intrinsically about a lot of that. There's some thinking that needs to be done about the programs you put people on. So one of our programs is a technology skills development program, which historically in any organization would say it's a graduate program, but it isn't. It's for anyone that has an aptitude for tech or digital, and we measure that through some psychometrics, that not education. So it could be parents who are returning from caring for their children, it could be veterans from the Army or Air Force, it could be graduates, it could be people internally who are potentially going to be displaced through a change program or want to change career, right? So we have to thinking that through, rather than having the traditional mindset that says, oh, well, if you've got a degree in X, Y, and Z from university X, Y, and Z, you must be good. We map some core competencies and aptitudes that we think would lead to success, and that's kind of test and learn, but working generally in order to get the most out of that talent, for example. So, and that's hard for some, in a mindset sense, for some managers to go, well, I went to Manchester University, so that must be the right place to be, right? And that's the tricky bit, is the change and communication of that. And then I think what's hard is, we are proud. So I guess for a smaller startup, it's easy, right? You are developing something new. For an organization that has a heritage, and we're proud of some of the history and legacy, and we should be, how do you not throw the baby out with the bathwater? That's the hard bit, because there is that tendency in consultant speakers to come in and say, oh, well, everything that went before is not good. Can't be true. We've been successful for 150 years, so we need to reinvent ourselves again in the minds of our members and customers and employees, right?
And that's a fantastic way to frame the conversation. Thank you for setting that out, not only in terms of the breadth of things that you're thinking about, but also the depth, and then thinking about the skills and the attitude and the leadership. I mean, there's an enormous amount in there. Kenny, I'm really keen to, because with each of these kind of key sections we're going to go through on the panel, I'm really keen to get a second opinion. And I saw you nodding along quite a bit there. I just would kind of love to come to you for your thoughts on this question about digital culture and also what's difficult.
Absolutely. I was definitely doing a lot of nodding because I could echo a lot of what John has already shared. I really do also think that to build on what John said about building the competency really does start right with your people, and knowing that you have to be intentional about kind of this innovative spirit within organizations. it's really about where does digital transformation happen somewhere between the idea, the technology, and that the solution has to be more than just good for today. It needs to be good for the future. And so I think when you're building a culture of innovation, it is really about being specific, naming it, defining it, core competencies driven, and then living it. And I would say around both the gifts and the struggle regarding an innovative culture is really built, at least we build ours around the kind of 3 L's, if you will: listening, learning, and leading. And listening really stems from listening to your organization. Your employees are your greatest asset. They're consumers, right? They're your frontline staff members. They're the ones who are delivering the service to your consumers. And then learning from those and creating a culture where you're able to say, hey, we're going to try new things and it's going to be okay if it doesn't work out the first time. How do you iteratively get better over time by just the pure spirit of trying? And then finally, around leadership, really leading, first of all, it's super scary, right? Super unsure of what exactly you're going to actually lead to do, but can you move faster? Can you influence? Can you build a place where it's okay to say, we don't know the answer and we're willing to partner with things like fintechs or partner with other, even competition at times, to say, hey, there's something that we can do better. And if we can do that together, there's certainly going to be some growth from both sides of the culture.
Wonderful, and I love the whole the points which I've added very much to John's comments, thinking about the future and also thinking about, actually it's all good to have it on a poster inside the office, but actually how do you bring it to life, which is fantastic. Thank you for those opening comments, and I can't help but think, I said at the beginning, the world has changed. It has shifted. This year has just been extraordinary. And what impact has that had? So I would love to, Steve, I would love to come to you, actually, because you have this blend of not only being the chair of a financial institution, but also kind of in the world of software and technology as well. So really my question is, what's changed around digital culture and what have you done to address that?
Thank you, Julia. I would say that my mother would have said, I just can't hold a job down. I've got a low boredom threshold. I think the reality is that everything's changed, but on one level, nothing's changed. And I'd like to answer that, wearing my 2 hats. I think from a platform provider, so Sky provides cloud-based core banking platforms. We provided those from Africa into Europe, into the UK, from credit unions, microfinance to existing banks and neobanks. And what I would say is that what we've seen with COVID is a massive increase in interest in core banking for both good and bad reasons. I think generally because the expectations of consumers are starting to change, have to do because of COVID, but also the inability of existing banks and building societies particularly to actually work within those new expectations because of their technology. For me, the challenge of technology and the reason that they are looking at core banking is they're actually probably looking at the wrong thing, because I totally agree with both John and Kelly. Actually, this is about culture. It's about cultural change and the expectations from the consumer. We've gone through banking. I mean, John said 150 years. For most building societies are well over 100 years, and for probably 140 of those, their banking technology has not been an issue. It really hasn't. And therefore, the investment in that technology has been probably across the sector very, very poor because it's been traditional and actually built on many things. But one thing they really support is mutuality and that. Is mutuality good enough in the future? Are we now looking at what members need, customers want in a new environment? I mean, I go back to the point, ecology itself was set up some 40 years ago by some very strange people at the time who wanted to build a greener society. I think at the time that was seen a bit crazy, but I think now it's probably quite forward thinking. And at the time there were 268 building societies. There are now 43. And everyone talks about the building society sector and how it changed with COVID. I mean, John will know as well as I do. Even out of those 43, the business models other than mutuality are very different. There are ones with branches, ones who are very focused on the community. Ones like ecology is small, but only has one office and operates nationally. And I think it's very key to me that there are changes happening within societies generally, we are quite strange as ecology, because when we survey our members and what they want more of, it's not better interest rates or lower mortgage rates, it's more activism, which I think gives us a strange connection with our members, other than just mutuality. What we have done is through engagement with our staff, and we've actually probably done more work with our members over the last 6 months than we've done over the last 2 or 3 years, in trying to manage their expectations, but asking them what they require from us going forward as an organisation. As you probably were, and some people I'm sure who are listening to this or watching it will know that many societies still have passbooks and the essence of a red book for voting, but also having all their details in, which actually, when you take COVID, is that a practical solution? So I think a lot of societies and ecologies, one of them, are looking how we operate digitally, but actually internally, the cultural shift is phenomenal. Because what we're saying is, you're not going to be doing the same jobs again because of the way we're looking at technology, digital, onboarding, whatever. How do we reassess the skill sets that you need to help us go forward? So I think what COVID has done is actually only speed up the change that was necessary, I think, in the building society and mutual sector.
Yeah, fascinating. Really, really interesting. And I love that the point you made about, actually, it's not always just about, so the interest rates, it's also about the activism and wanting to see your financial institution, get involved as well. George, can I bring you in here? Again, love to, responding to what Steve said, and also thinking about the impact for your customers during COVID as well. Love to get your thoughts about what's changed and what you've done to help address that.
Yeah, definitely. I'd certainly like to pick up on what Steve was saying there and resonate that ourselves, because I think many financial institutions have been on a digital journey for quite a while, but the whole experience with COVID has accelerated what the customer experience is going to be. I mean, pre-COVID, I must have been the only one in my family that knew what Zoom was and had a Zoom account, and now everybody down to our grandchild knows what Zoom is and how to log on and how to set up a call with anybody that they want to do. So digital capabilities have given everybody now a shared experience of what is possible. So when it comes to the societies and what financial institutions are doing, I certainly believe that they have to look at adopting the technology as one, but also how to make their products and the themes around their products as exciting as possible. So when you look at the shopping experience of today with people like Amazon, people still like to go out to the high street, and I'm sure that sooner or later we'll get back to our high street type of activity. But when everybody's shopping online now, they want instant information about what the product is, what's the price of the product, and how they can get that product as quickly as possible through whichever delivery channel. And in financial services, it's no different. So I think, building societies especially need to look at how they can innovate themselves in terms of bringing new products to market quickly, and with exciting propositions at the right sort of price for individual types of members, so that they can be consumed as quickly as possible. Because it's 1 or 2 clicks away from either getting the product or them going and shopping somewhere else. And I think this is something in the digital culture that we need to be aware of. Another point I'd sort of like to make is around the people. I think one of the things that the pandemic has shown us is that the adoption and the ability from people to work from home, and I hope this is something that John has found within the Nationwide Society, is that do we all need to be in the same building to do our jobs effectively? Yeah. So when you're looking at people and trying to bring on the best people to work within your organization, do we have to relocate them hundreds of miles away from their friends and their family and then go and hope that they become acquainted to the place in which they're going to live, as well as the place in which they're going to work? Or can we work out now a way of working remotely and bringing people in together? Now, in our particular world, because we are a vendor here in terms of selling not only products but services as well, we've adopted over many years now of working at this a much more agile approach. Now, the agile approach or methodology starts off with a very simple Scrum conference call every day, where everybody within your team can come together for 5 to 10 minutes and just interact. Then after that interaction, they go away, they fulfill their jobs, they get their objectives done, but they feel very, very much still part of a team, even though they work in different countries and sometimes even different continents. So this is just something that I think that companies, especially in the financial services world, are figuring out, that cloud is not, cloud adoption is not going to go away, and we now need to bring this all together to make sure that teams can work.
Well, let me bring John in there, because you were referencing about obviously the remote working and then also the working practices as well. John, just kind of fairly quickly.
I echo what George and Steve have said, but I think bring it into sharp focus. We have, and I agree with Steve, it's just sped up the innovation, right? So when I joined the society coming up 3 years ago, all of our telephony consultants in one of our channels were based in 1 out of 4 or 5 admin centres. By early May, and only hampered by ordering equipment, we had 75% of them working from home, right? And that is still the case, and that's going to be the case. So now it's about choice, and the leadership at the time was, you can't have contact centre people work from home; they'll never do their job, and actually, we've seen no drop in productivity. Obviously, sickness rates have dropped because people are at home. Now, more to the point of employee engagement, we don't want to kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater and say you cannot go into an office. You may have good reason for all sorts of reasons, especially in roles that are as lowly paid as that. But the option is there. And I think the watch out for us as part of our mutuality and social purpose is, what impact is this having on the digital divide, right? So are we putting off people applying for those roles potentially that may not have broadband, or maybe in shared accommodation where they might not have a quiet space? We don't know the answer to that. We will embrace the flexibility, but I think from a social mobility and fairness perspective, that's just something to watch out for from a societal wide perspective.
Yeah. Well, I think this is really interesting, because I think what I'd like to do now is move the conversation on to what the future holds, and we're beginning to already with some of your comments there to kind of frame that really, really quite beautifully as well. And George, I want to come back to you on this point really, which is, when you're talking to your clients and expectations for 2021, and I deliberately suggest this in a short time frame, because it is going from one strange year into another strange year. I fully expect, particularly in the UK, is what particularly you thinking around for your customers?
Yeah, so the future, I think, has been again on this journey, but it has been accelerated by the current sort of social conditions that we find ourselves. But technology is just moving faster and faster, and unfortunately, we're all sort of succumbing to the thing here, which is what Apple have created. I mean, these are the guys that started this whole thing off, and every customer expects the same type of experience. So whether you're buying anything from a supermarket through to financial services, they just want to be able to consume the information and get select that product as quickly as they can. So I think the future is just going to continue, but it's just going to move much, much faster. I think the pandemic has got everybody thinking about digital in terms of what we do and how we utilize it. And I just think that it's just not going to change, Julia. I just think it's just going to get faster and faster. And it doesn't necessarily mean that companies will get left behind if they don't adopt a certain thing. I still think there is going to be a need for a mixture of digital capability as well as the traditional capabilities that the building societies do offer. But I do think that they have a unique opportunity to really start to look at how, one, they can keep their existing more traditional type of members, but also look at attracting and acquiring new members like John's daughter into the society. And it's just figuring out how to adopt the technology wisely to make it work for you. That's what I think the future will hold.
Well, Kelly was talking earlier about listening, learning. So Kelly, when you're thinking about framing the future, working with employees and also with customers as well, what are the big things you're thinking about? And if I could ask all of you to add to each other's comments rather than repeat, that would be amazing. Thank you.
Absolutely. So George, I would absolutely agree with the points he made about the speed, and I think really it's around access, right? Access and the willingness to try things maybe that you haven't done before. And that goes for consumers and for employees alike. And so culturally, specifically in this digital transformation that we hear oftentimes dropped, internally, I like to think of it as really it's looking for talent who believes in exactly what you're doing and they're willing to make the organization better. It's not just showing up for a job, right? It's not just tuning into an iPad or a laptop to do your job. It's really around, can you help build the muscle within the organization and finding the people who will say, hey, I'm a CEO of this role. And they take that role very seriously and they're contributing to the experience that you're offering consumers, the experience they're offering their peers, really becomes a differentiator, I believe. And so it starts from within and then bleeds obviously into how your consumers feel when they're interacting with you. A few things that we do at the Credit Union of Colorado to help build that muscle is we built an innovation program which is around ambassadorship. And that's really where you have a small group of individuals that you bring in. You're able to teach them design thinking, really built around, right, empathy, right, defining true problems to solve, whether that's incremental things that are, if you put a button here, it would make this so much easier. Or the future of, hey, when we go to autonomous vehicles, we should be thinking about X, Y, Z because that could disrupt our right, the way that we serve our members. And really going back to, again, that crowdsourcing idea, belief that we have, which is that our employees are our greatest assets. And so they know the problems that are had. They know the things that as consumers they're missing from that experience, like George mentioned, which is the speed, the I want it now moment, and then really being able to help a solution. So it's not just about the idea either. It's also in coupling with the fact that, hey, here's the idea. Now help us build a solution that works. And maybe that works for now, and that's okay. But let's revisit that and not just put it back on the shelf with a decision that we made, a vendor that we partnered with, which I believe really speaks to why fintechs, their spirit, sometimes it's less about the product that they have. Or, definitely they're filling a need, but it's about the spirit that they bring that says, hey, we can do this better. We can do it faster. And by the way, we didn't think about that. And so there's this mutual exclusivity that occurs when you're, again, cross-pollinating, or what I like to call intentional collision. Example today, right? The opportunity for us to speak together. This would not necessarily normally have happened without COVID. And so really thinking about the lessons we can learn and being willing to say, what's the differentiator? And are you willing to say it's your people? Are you willing to say it's your product? Are you willing to say, guess what? It has to be all of it, would be my take on the future of what we must adopt.
That's great. That's wonderful. I love the whole thing about intentional collision. I don't think that's the story of my life, actually. John, thank you, Kenny. So John, let's hear your thoughts. I mean,
next year, I won't repeat what anyone else has said, but I think for us, nationwide, there is, we will do more from a business perspective. We'll do more what we call venturing. So whether that's partnerships with smaller fintechs or whether that's acquisitions or both, that we have a team that is actively looking at that kind of innovation that you can either bring in or partner. And then from a people, our employees' point of view, it's really, this whole time has compressed the change, but is ensuring that teams are multifunctional rather than the old silos of divisions. So we are a large organization. So the intent is always I protect my pitch, whereas we know we have to work across multifunctional teams and to Laura's point, the mindset of the individuals in that is as important as the skill. Understanding you've got to have a competency, but if you're not prepared to share and collaborate, then the mission is almost failed before it's taken off, right?
Absolutely. And Steve, I'd love to know your thoughts on, so first of all, what you've heard, but also obviously given your customer base is calling for a degree of activism as well. So what's particularly front of your mind?
Well, I'm feeling a little bit like David Cameron at the Coalition, where he's agreeing with Nick. So I'm agreeing with Kelly, Jonathan, and George really on all those. I think for me,
you all don't agree with each other.
No, I think to add to that, I think for me it's about clarity of thought at the top. I think and that's bringing people with you, because I think when you're looking at digital tech, what used to be IT and now IT is such a broad subject, and with cybersecurity and the like. But I think it's why you're bringing in those changes, what working practices then is going to change, and what benefits it's going to give to both you as an entity and also to the members. One quick example of something bad. I worked for a bank a few years ago, who were actually small bank, who were actually basically buying time off another bank's mainframe, and actually decided to have their own banking platform. And actually, it was a Canadian credit union one that ultimately was bought because of the agility and whatever. But what we did was put it in and take exactly the same information from our core banking and put it in there. And everything was account driven. Everything was exactly as we'd used it before. Whereas the system we bought was all about customer orientation, profitability. And we never actually used that system to the benefit either internally or to our customer. We just used the basic. So 80% of that system was a total waste because we hadn't got clarity of thought at the time from the management of why we were doing this and what the future benefits would be both internally and externally. And I think for me, the challenge that we've had at Ecology is, yes, yeah, everything we do has got to be about the environment, about climate change and green. So we do have that activism. But to do that, we have to be a first-class building society. Part of our problem has been technology, because over the years, we haven't invested enough in that technology platform. And the reality is that the one thing that new banks and everyone else has got is data. And we as a small building society really, and data is as much a currency as sterling and dollars are to help us manage both internally and externally. And we don't have any of that to the extent that we should have. And I think that's where we're trying to focus our energies on, is how do we actually access data which will help us serve our members both now and in the future better.
Hey, Steve, sorry, Julie. I just wanted to, something you said, Steve, really resonated with me, and specifically, right, looking at the George Square as the vendor on the call. Something that you mentioned, I think that's really important, is that it's not just the entity who owns the technology, yes, should be forefront and driving it, but also holding our vendor partners accountable. Yes. So that when you bought your solution, you don't just buy it and stick it on the shelf, right? You say to vendor A, all right, so we're in iterative design, right? We're going to buy the base solution, put it in, and then what is the experience, the relationship going to look like, say, with George and his right, as a vendor, to continue to iteratively get better? Because we almost, we like to buy things, put them on shelves, and then go, oh, this is so outdated, we've got to go look for another solution. When actually there could be some really great things that originally attracted us to the vendor, but we tend to sometimes not recall those or not iteratively design the technology and force the vendor to continue to stay relevant and stay innovative.
Exactly.
Yeah, wonderful, great, and then that's really in a very short period of time we've explored this from so many different dimensions. So thank you all for all your thoughts. What I'd really like to do now is kind of just move on to a really important aspect, which is we talk a lot in the world of fintech. And I say that from the smallest organizations to the largest perspectives, if you like, about what's happening in our own, Steve talked about data, they've got APIs, we can talk about open banking, but let's talk about even more broadly into the concept, if you like, of open finance and open innovation. And I would be really interested to hear from all of you about, what you're thinking about outside our industry. Are there some initiatives, are there some opportunities, or are there even potential threats that are happening in other sectors or other segments that you're paying particular attention to? So Kelly, let's stay with you on that, if we would.
Absolutely. So totally agree with previous comments regarding that we are judged or compared against not just the FI down the street or the app next door to yours on the phone, that you really are, we are competing specifically for smaller community banks and for credit unions. You really are trying to do a lot with minimal resources at times compared to, Julia, your reference, right? Larger entities who have much larger R&D budgets, much large tech budgets. And so you really are competing against the Amazon, the global experience. And so I think being mindful of, what are the expectations that are out there, right? Fast, intuitive. One thing we haven't mentioned is really personalized. Right? The experience needs to be able to dictate to me, thanks to Amazon and Apple and Facebook and some of those things, what I'm expecting to see next when I do a search. Is the experience consumer centric? And really saying, is it relevant to what's in it for our users? And so I really think the opportunities are around expanding what it means to serve our consumers. I don't believe the day and age of differentiation of checking accounts or specific types of auto loans outside of rates really are that niche. And so how do you, my thoughts are around how do you take financial services and intertwine those into daily life? Considering an example I'll just throw out is rideshare. Rideshare, obviously pre-COVID, potentially higher appeal at that point, but what would it mean for a financial institution to really be part of that conversation? To look at the cell phone providers who, if you think about it, are financing small loans for consumers on their new devices. And so really around, my thought is on the opportunities is for financial institutions in general to look beyond themselves and to say, how do we become more relevant than just holding one's money or being a service where lending is your primary platform? And one last thing I'd mention just really about threats is around this shared economy model, the shared consumers to be willing to say, George, don't buy a hammer, I'll share my hammer with you. And so if that model exists and we start to make payments differently, we start to consume differently, the threats around that to financial institutions could be great. And really the fact that we don't oftentimes naturally move as fast as what consumers' expectations are. We tend to get at times, as Steve mentioned, complacent with, this is good enough for now. And so how can we partner with institutions, with vendors to really make sure that, hey, we're not just keeping our mind within our four walls and we're saying we've got to be part of the conversation more than just what's money.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you very much for that. Great food for thought. And so, well, let's go straight to Steve then. You say the thoughts about, are we becoming complacent? What should we be thinking about?
I agree with all that Kelly said. I mean, for me, it's very simple. I think that generally I mentioned about data, but I think the two things that we have to compete against are convenience and social media. It's that sort of interaction that we have to have with our members as a mutual sector. I said before that we've not invested as much in technology, and we're struggling even more as a building society sector with the change of pace. And there are new entrants coming in on mortgage and savings. When I first joined the cooperative movement, my chief exec was the chief exec of the cooperative movement, and he said, Steve, now you're in the cooperative movement, you need to understand two things. It's not cooperative and it doesn't move. So I laughed and he said, no, you need to really understand that. And one of the issues I have with the mutual sector is it talks a lot but doesn't move very fast. And I believe that they've got to adapt generally, not just as individual societies, but actually to the new mutuality, which is to taking John's point and George's about different approaches for offering the services. And I think some of the building societies that have branches may not actually be transacting an awful lot, but they can become community hubs and actually acting in that sense and actually creating hubs. Because one of the reason I mentioned social media is we're a membership-based organization. We should almost have ecology Twitter, or because there should be that dynamic to create something more valuable than just transacting. Because otherwise, it's going to be price all the time.
That makes a lot of sense. Makes sense. Wonderful. Thank you for that. And George, you mentioned earlier you're the vendor. As you're looking at your base of clients and also think about what you're thinking about. Sorry, what your customers are thinking about, and also your priorities. Where do you look beyond this world?
Yeah, I was trying to think of a suitable response to this particular question, Julia, and I must admit I do find myself aligning with Steve on pretty much everything, because I do think that outside of the financial services industry, we have to look at what's happening with social media and the fact that, we've got a whole new generation of people that are growing up that will then become our new customers and members in the building society market. And they've got issues around climate change, social injustice. You had Black Lives Matter come up recently. So all of this resonates with the young people. And what this shows me is through social media, because we all probably had views ourselves at certain times on various ideology. But now social media just pushes that quickly and people make judgments very, very quickly. So I think, this gives the building societies a very big opportunity to align themselves to what is happening out there socially and think about how they can help within their local communities, because many of the building societies are known for working within the local communities. and how they can bring sort of new products and innovation to those communities, I think would be a very big way of helping them, not rebrand, perhaps that's a bit too strong, but, you know, get some new ideas as to how they compete against the big bad banks, because that's how, you know, the youngsters would see mainstream banking today. And that's where I think they can make a big difference.
I think it sounds like there's a massive opportunity out there as well. So John, it only feels right to sort of ask you to finish us off, actually, in terms of, you know, your opening comments about being one of the oldest institutions. Yeah. And what are you thinking about?
Well, I think exactly that, you know, opportunities and threats, in the sense we need to make the mutuality and building societies relevant and sexy for new, you know, graduates, new talent, and we need to play to that purpose and work in the communities. And I think another threat, though, is looking at the external. If I look up the recruitment lens, we hire, in experienced hire or leadership roles, a lot of people from our, you know, so-called competitors, which is an opportunities missed, right? So we're really fishing and saying, you know, actually the big four banks or whoever, they're a bit like us, where it's a bit safe. Actually, we should learn from Amazon's, the other, you know, other potential entrants, because they could be in that thinking, and not you know, not whole scale, but that we have to shift that thinking because to stay relevant. Yeah,
fascinating. And it's, you know, these are deeply complex times, and they're deeply complex challenges, actually. And I think it's been an incredible discussion. Thank you all so much for all your insights. If you think about it, we started with what is digital culture. Then we recognize that the climate is changing now, and the way in which we're working, actually just even navigating these times, let alone innovating during these times. And some of that's being accelerated by COVID, some of that's being determined by COVID. Then thinking about, you know, the path ahead. There's some really key questions there about, you know, innovation, collaboration, what members and customers really want, and also how to engage with workforces and employees to capture and harness the best ideas, and then to look beyond our world and actually think about some of those external factors as well. So it's been a fantastic conversation. Kenny, John, Steve, George, thank you all so much for listening. To everybody who's tuned in to watch, I hope you've enjoyed the discussion as much as I have. My name is Julia Streets. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.